this computer. Record here. All right, here we go. Okay, here we are with Cam Adair. Cam, how you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great and excited to get started. I learn a little bit more about your journey and all the great work that you're doing. So, Cam, why don't you give us the cliff notes on your background and how you've gotten to where you are today with Game Quitters?
So this all started with my own personal journey, and that really started when I was 11. I started gaming at that age, and today I joke that if someone out there started gaming at 11 years old, that's like a modern day miracle because they start gaming far younger these days. Average screen time for toddlers is 3 hours a day. So we've seen, just the prevalence of screen time, of gaming starting at earlier and earlier ages. And, that's had certain concerns. But what happened was when I was 13, I began to experience a lot of bullying. And that happened not only at school, but also on my hockey teams where I was a high level hockey player in Canada. And that bullying kind of led me to want to escape. And so I escaped into gaming. Gaming really hadn't been a big problem in my life up until that point, other than kind of during school holidays or like summer break, when I would no longer have school, no longer have hockey, and gaming kind of replaced all that time. But when I was 13, started to be bullied, want to escape. Gaming's really effective at allowing me to escape. And so I actually ended up dropping out of high school, and I never graduated, never went to college. I was gaming up to 16 hours a day, living in my parents' basement.
Wow.
Playing games like StarCraft and Counter-Strike and World of Warcraft, very kind of competitive-based games, strategy-based games. And eventually got to a point where I was pretending to have jobs, deceiving my family, and even ended up writing a suicide note.
Oh, wow.
And it was that night when I kind of realized I need to make a change. Thankfully, I did. And with the help of a counselor, started turning things around. And kind of eventually, I guess it was about 2 or 3 years later, I shared my story on a blog I had, which was really just kind of sharing different things I was learning out there on personal growth and personal development and lifestyle design. And I started to hear from tens of thousands of people all over the world who were saying, I'm also struggling with gaming. I need help. Can you help? What do we do about this? And this was back in about 2011. So if you think about like how far this issue's come today, well, back then there was like nothing. And yet there were all these people looking for help. It wasn't their parents saying you need to stop. It wasn't their spouse. It was themselves saying,
Wow.
I can't stop. So I decided to do something about it, and we launched GameQuitters.com. And over the last couple of years, it's really grown pretty large, and we reach about 75,000 people a month right now.
Amazing.
95 different countries. I do this full time, travel all over the world speaking about it.
Cool. Well, great job changing the world, Cam, and doing some awesome work. I'm sure you've probably saved many lives and also, not that, improved the quality of life for many. So I thank you for doing that. Tell me, like, what is your method? Could we talk about some of your methods? Like if someone comes to you, maybe through the site, how do you go about helping them as far as, creating some more balance or being more aware of how they're gaming?
So there's a really big distinction for me between someone coming forward asking for help and a family member or loved one coming forward asking to try to help someone else. So if someone is coming forward themselves, then there's a couple kind of key steps they need to take. The first thing is that I recommend that they stop for 90 days. And that's around cold turkey.
Yeah.
And that's around giving them an opportunity to really create a contrast in their life between life with gaming and life without it. For so many of these guys, and they're typically guys, about 90% of people that I see tend to be male. For so many of them, they've never actually lived life without gaming. And the thought of them quitting gaming is the thought of stepping into the unknown, into like a void that they have no idea what that even looks like. And so actually stopping for 90 days as an experiment to see what life is like without gaming gives them an opportunity where at the end of that, whether they decide to go back to gaming, try and moderate, or realize that, you know what, I just want to quit for good, it allows them to feel more certain in their life that whether gaming is there or not, they would be okay.
Right.
And from a quality of life measure standpoint, from a study that we published, we found that the average person who came to us on day 0, they were at 3.5 out of 10 on a quality of life measure scale, evaluated across 12 different areas of their life, like physical health, mental health, their appearance, focus, time management, relationships. And at the end of 90 days, they were at 7. So they were seeing 2x improvement to their overall well-being after just 90 days. And I think that's a really significant number. So
Yes.
the first thing is, whether it's 90 days or it's 60 days or 30 days or a week or 2 days, whatever it is, give yourself a chance to just spend some time without games, because you'll begin to kind of no longer see gaming as such an important, the only thing in your life. The second thing is obviously they need to find new things to do. And that's finding a new skill to develop, finding a new way to relax after school or work, to just kind of de-stress, and new ways to make friends. Gaming is very effective at fulfilling a number of emotional needs. You can escape, you can see measurable progress, you can feel a sense of purpose, and you do it with all your friends. And that's why gaming can become your life, because it's fulfilling all your different needs. And you need to balance that out with other activities. Gaming can be a part of your life, but it doesn't have to be your life.
Mm-hmm.
And next, they need to schedule their day, be more intentional with their time, especially their free time. Because during their free time, if they're sitting around just kind of bored, staring at the ceiling, well, they'll justify gaming because it can't be worse than just staring at the ceiling. And joining a support group. And whether that's like working with a professional, a counselor, a 12-step group, the Game Quitters community, or just some friends, family, really having a support system is really important as well.
Yeah. Awesome. That's a great little process there, Cam. Now, what if, so when they come to you and you say, hey, we recommend you getting offline or getting off games for X amount of days, how do people respond? What happens when they're incapable of, and how do you sort of pair it with other hobbies? Like, what does that process look like a little more?
What's really interesting to me is that when people are coming forward asking for help and we say 90 days no gaming, they're so willing to do it.
Interesting.
And I've interviewed thousands of these guys about this question because I've always been so curious. Because everyone who's not the gamer, like the loved one or the friend or even you and I maybe, we look at asking someone to quit for 90 days as surely that is way too much. That's too long. That seems too intense. It seems too abrupt. But for the guys coming forward asking for help, they're very willing to do it. Now, that might be because it's a challenge, or it just makes sense from a give yourself an experiment, allow yourself to experience life without gaming, and then decide. Because before they've quit, if you're trying to say you need to quit gaming or you need to do something else with your life, they don't even know what that means. They don't even know what that looks like. And they need to develop more confidence and more assurance that they can understand what that really that experience will be. And
Yeah.
so giving them an experiment, I think, has been really helpful.
Yeah. Are there some activities that are like some like go-to activities, particular for gamers that really work well? Because I'd like to think that maybe obviously everyone's a little bit different, and people like different games, whether they be like achievement-based games or more narrative-focused games. But are there certain types of people or gamers that will gravitate towards certain new types of activities or hobbies?
For instance, what you just said, there's a group that will be more achievement based. And for them, things like any skill to develop, like learning a new instrument, learning a new language, maybe starting a side business, starting to learn rock climbing or coding, anything that's really immersive, because they like achievement based games. They generally like to be the character, like they're in flow state. So sports, right, is a great example. I played strategy competitive based games. I love sports. Whereas my brother and other people I know, they like the narratives. They like more role-playing games, story-based games. For them, they like to create characters. So things like filmmaking or drama or improv or theater could be really good for them. And when they discover it, they may have discovered the thing that they've always truly loved, but they never had the opportunity to try it. One of my favorite stories is of a 17-year-old named Andrew. And he emailed me when he was 17, and basically on a Saturday, he was at home by himself. He played for 10 hours straight. His parents came home. They said, "What did you do today?" And he just realized that he had just spent his entire day gaming away. And this had been going on for quite a while. And he realized he needed to make a change. So he decided to quit. And a new hobby he chose was photography because his family had this camera. And he picked it up and just fell in love with photography. And now he's traveled all over the world. He's been to Central America. He's been to New Zealand. He's been mentored by a National Geographic photographer. His story was actually done for a press feature. And he's really found this love for photography. And all he did was pick up the family camera because he decided not to game that day and found his true passion. So
Yeah.
I think that's a really big focus. But coding could be another one. Really trying to think about why you game and maybe matching those interests with new activities.
Love that. And you mentioned scheduling the day. Well, tell me, let's dig in on that a little bit. I mean, I'm trying to picture like, you know, a 13-year-old boy coming to you and yet maybe he's trying to, he realizes he's not happy, but I mean, are you saying that a 13-year-old boy will start to schedule his day, or does he need some help? How does that work?
Yeah, well, first, working together is a great way. For a 13-year-old boy, I'd recommend instead of having like a huge agenda, I'd have a whiteboard in his room or a whiteboard, you know, maybe in the living room with different hobbies that he can do when he gets home from school.
Mhm.
The other thing I'd really focus on is thinking about the transition from school. So I do this when I present to students all the time. I say, you know, who's tired when you're, you know, done school for the day? And everyone raises their hand. And I say, so what do you do when you get home from school? You want a break before you do homework. What do you do? And they all say, I watch YouTube or I start playing video games. And then it's the way those are designed, they keep them engaged so much or the stimulation is so high that they don't get back to their homework, right? And then there's conflict with parents and people are upset. And it all happened because they genuinely needed a break after school before homework, but what they chose during that time led them down a path that wasn't productive. So how could they think a bit differently about how they transition from school into their homework, which might be sports, which might be going for a walk, which might be having a nap, which might be reading or drawing or doing art for a minute, depending on the person, but doing something different that eases that transition so that they're able to do their homework, have dinner with the family, and then maybe game a little bit for an hour before they start getting ready for bed. That flow is very different and makes a big difference.
Right. Now, Kim, what about like the social factors that are playing in here? I mean, a lot of people's social lives are online, and even if they're not, you know, playing video games a ton, maybe, you know, the social media wise, if you're going to start wanting to spend more time offline, let's say picking up photography, how would you guide a young man to go about talking with others or communicating the fact that, hey, I'm now going to be limiting my video game time a little bit, because that could obviously hurt the relationship. So how does social elements play in here?
Well, the social element is huge. And one of the biggest challenges that people have currently is that gaming is the central social aspect of any high school or middle school student these days.
Right.
You know, what happens if you're the one who's not gaming? Now you have nothing to talk about with other kids at school. That's really tough. And I can empathize with gamers or students or families who allow gaming strictly to fulfill that. But I think that at some point, families have to step up and say, I'm going to lead the way and I'm going to start organizing the community back together. And parents need to rally together and say, okay, you know, on Mondays after school, you know, we'll have them over and they'll be outside for a bit. And on Tuesdays, a different parent maybe is in charge, and really try to find new ways to ensure that they're in different activities so that, again, gaming's not the only social outlet, because
Right.
then that's where gaming becomes their life.
Yeah.
And gaming needs to be a part of it. So I think leadership is a huge part of this. I think really families working together to ensure that, you know, there's more balance, there's healthier habits. And just for gamers to understand that, you know, I have a friend who didn't grow up with the TV. And some would say, or I would say, or would have assumed, like, does she understand anything about culture or pop culture or like any music or movies or anything from growing up. And she's super cultured and
Right.
travels around the world, and she knows a lot about a lot of different things. And so she was fine. And I think that some of the fears of if they're not gaming, they won't be social are a bit overblown.
Yeah, I actually had a friend who same thing, grew up no TV, and he's turned out just fine. There's no difference between him and anybody else. Cam, what about like what I call like a functional addict, which is someone who just weaves in gaming throughout his day, between classes, at lunch, but their life is not in complete disarray. Are there harms there where playing micro games throughout the day, not maybe playing for 4 hours at a time, but it's sort of getting weaved into the fabric of their lives? Could that harm lives as well, or is that okay?
Well, I think that harm generally acts on a spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm a big believer in hard is hard. And Ash Beckham said this in a great TEDx talk. Hard is hard. What's hard for me and what's hard for you, it doesn't matter if one is worse than the other. It's not about comparison. It's about recognizing that whatever I'm struggling with is very real for me. And I need to be able to navigate that or get support for that in whatever way I need to. And so don't compare so much, but just focus on what your situation is, and do you want to make improvements. So I would look at is there a difference between a family I have whose 18-year-old son sold his truck for $17,000 and is living with grandma in the basement because she can't supervise him because she can't get downstairs to the basement, and his room literally has a pile of fast food trash. Like that's a really bad situation versus a kid who's just gaming a bit and he has B's and his family wishes he had A's, right? I think we have to make that decision for ourselves. Generally, it's not like harm is a bit of an intense word, but is it helping you reach your full potential? Is it serving you? Is it in alignment with your values? Is it helping you be the person that you want to be? Because when I'm gaming a lot, I don't really like who I become. I'm more irritable. I tend to not be as present with friends and family. I skip events because I'd rather use that time to game. And, is it really hurting my life? Not in a negative, huge way, but it's not really helping me be the happiest and most fulfilled I can be either
Right.
when, I'm doing other activities. So we all have to make that choice for ourselves.
Right. And Cam, what about after like the 90 days or after the period of using, of being cold turkey off games? What's the process for reintegrating gaming into their lives, if at all?
It's a personal choice. I've had a variety of different people over the years. Some try it and are successful because they have new habits developed. They have more balance. Some try it and initially it's okay, but then it snowballs into bigger problems. Others decide they don't want to go back at all. It really depends on yourself. For those who try it and it becomes a problem again, they have a lot more awareness that a problem is occurring, and they tend to take action on it fairly quickly because they've been able to do it before. And I think that's the most important thing is having that sort of contrast in your life and breaking that attachment. It's important whenever we're talking about addiction or we're talking about kind of problematic habits that they generally exist within a certain environment. So you're isolated, you're not spending time outside, you're not exercising, you only game, you don't have other hobbies and interests, you don't spend time in person with friends in face-to-face interactions. And if you're doing those things and you're going to school or you're going to work, gaming just, there isn't a lot of space for gaming to become a significant problem. It's when you're not doing those things that then you tend to be a lot more isolated, and that's where gaming can become a problem. So the process of reintegration ideally involves you having established those lifestyle habits and then starting with gaming maybe in small amounts, choosing your games wisely because different games can have different levels of sensitivity, but really evaluating that on a basis of, is this working? Is it serving me? Is it in alignment with my values? And if it's not, making those necessary adjustments as you need to.
Right. Now you mentioned there's different types of games, Cam. I think a lot about Fortnite, and I've been playing with ideas of replicating what Fortnite does well in real life and having kids compete in that way with small challenge groups and all that. Can you speak to Fortnite and maybe just the landscape of games that are out there and what kids are gravitating towards?
Games are very different than they used to be. I joke when I present to parents that we're no longer in the era of Pong and Pac-Man and Atari. And I'm not here to say that people who played those games are old, but games are different these days.
Yeah.
And these games today are digital products that are optimized for levels of engagement. They use all the latest behavioral psychology. They're designed by PhD level behavioral psychologists, and they know what keeps you there, what keeps you spending money. And I think that's one of the big differences with games these days is that traditionally you bought a game, you got the game, you played the game, you finished it, you bought a new game. Today, these games go on endlessly forever. Fortnite's updated every 10 weeks, different map, different characters, new weapons, different challenges, everything resets. And that's a significant way to keep you involved in that game specifically. Obviously, the prize pools that exist for esports, like a 16-year-old winning $3 million playing Fortnite, that gives a lot of kids this hope that, wow, they could be a millionaire at 16. Obviously, the reality is that 40 million competitors, with the average age being 12 years old, were involved in that tournament, and 100 people out of that won $50,000 or more. And so the chance is very, very low. Not that I want to discourage anyone from pursuing that, but doing it realistically and with a backup plan, right? In sports, we're constantly told that, like, make sure you go to school, get a degree, because after sports are done, what are you going to do with your life, right? And so games are different. They use your data to keep you there, to keep you spending money, and to keep you hooked. And that's why I think we need to be very cautious of the way we engage them.
Definitely. And you mentioned professional gaming. I mean, so it's kind of like professional sports, right? It's just the chances are very slim. Can you just speak a little bit more to that? I mean, because I have heard that before. People want to be professional gamers. Even parents have gotten their kids private lessons for like Fortnite and stuff. I mean, what's going on with that?
Also, gaming does have a professional level. Generally, the term would be called esports, which is organized professional competition for gaming. It doesn't just happen at the professional level anymore, though. It also happens at the college level and at the high school level, specifically in the United States, but also globally. Different countries are progressing at a certain point, but for instance, in Australia, they have a high school esports academy, they have high school league, they have scholarships in college. In the US, there's over 600 universities or colleges that have either a scholarship, a varsity team, or a club team.
Wow.
And 3 years ago, that was like 60. It's grown very rapidly. NCAA is looking at doing a league for esports. And esports will be a big thing. It's already a big thing, over $1 billion industry, but it'll be significantly larger as infrastructure is developed from earlier and earlier ages. And that doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing. You know, it's good to have organized competition. It's also just important that any esports is done in parallel with a message of healthy gaming, balanced gaming. For a lot of kids to be pursuing esports, they need to be gaming 6, 7, 8, 10 hours a day. And it's difficult to maintain school grades and homework and, you know, just a healthy lifestyle for a teenager when they're gaming that much. You understand from baseball, kids to be the best at baseball need to put a lot of time into it. But the time in baseball doesn't just tend to be focused on baseball. It's more about exercise. It's about sports psychology. It's about their health and nutrition. It's about who they are as human beings and their character. And yeah, they play baseball, but it's not for 8, 10 hours a day.
Totally.
And there's a big difference there. And I think that we need to keep that in mind.
Love that. Kim, what's the role of governments and the companies that are creating the consoles and the games themselves to make it so that we aren't hurting the lives and of our kids or the future generations? What do you think the role is there, and where do you potentially see that going?
The gaming industry is very much at a crossroads. And personally, I think that their pursuit of integrating gambling mechanics into their games through things like loot boxes and in-app purchases has been a crucial mistake. It's been really good for their profits in the short term. I mean, you're seeing profits skyrocket into the billions from just these specific mechanics,
Mm,
loot boxes and things like that I'm talking about. But regulators are much more familiar with the risk of gambling and why kids should not be targeted with gambling. And I think regulations are coming a lot sooner than the gaming industry hopes or thinks. And the regulations are likely going to be more involved than they would have been if the gaming industry hadn't pursued that path. And I think they have themselves to blame for it. I think we need to protect kids from gambling like mechanics. The research generally is fairly conclusive when it comes to exposing kids to gambling. The earlier you're exposed to gambling, the more likely you are to have a gambling problem. There's research that shows that people who are exposed to gambling like games, video games, do migrate to real world gambling. They have bigger gambling problems, they have more gaming problems. And so I think it's a huge concern. A game like FIFA is rated E for everyone. It's rated appropriate for kids 3 plus, and yet it's one of the biggest examples of a game that has gambling mechanics
mm,
that tries to make money. You could look at the new NBA 2K20 game and the trailer that just came out. You know, NBA game, basketball game, and the entire trailer is just slot machines and casino gambling.
right.
And you're like, I thought this was a basketball game. So I think the industry's going to have a lot more regulation. I hope that the gaming companies start to be more involved, but a wise man once told me that you need to pay close attention to what sort of concessions the gaming industry is willing to do, because those are the ones that won't actually make a difference. But the ones that they fight and resist and refuse to give in on, those are the things that would actually make an impact. And so we need to be very cautious when the industry is saying, okay, we'll put warning labels on our games, or we'll disclose the odds of our loot boxes, or we'll make better parental controls. They're doing that because it allows them to say, look, we're taking action. And they know that that's not going to actually hurt their bottom line, which is all they really care about. But things like loot boxes being classified as a form of gambling, yeah, they're going to fight that with everything they've got, because that would mean they would need a gambling license to sell their games, and that would hurt the bottom line in a big way. And so I think we need to really think about what's really going to matter and what are we hoping for, which involves just protecting people from harm.
Yeah. So Cam, we've kind of talked about some of the downsides of over gaming, I suppose. But I mean, look, I think we could both agree that gaming's not all bad, right? And there's certainly a world where people can game and it could serve them in good ways and be a good release. And you know, even myself, who runs an offline company, like, I'll flip through Instagram for 5-10 minutes at a time. You know, everything in moderation. But what does healthy gaming usage look like to you? What are some examples of somebody or just a situation where someone's incorporated gaming back into their life in a healthy way?
Some signs that you want to be looking for are things like, you know, they're able to turn the game off and that doesn't cause a huge tantrum or an explosion. You want to look for, are they able to play in control, right? Where they don't have to play all the time. They're not craving it. It's not a compulsive desire.
Mm.
You know, gaming is a complement to their life. It's something they enjoy doing, but it's not the only thing that they do. You know, those are some good signs of healthy gaming. They still are probably doing sports or other activities. They still care about their schoolwork. You know, they're involved. I think when I look at some examples, um, for me, it's the kids who I've spoken to at schools where on the weekends or school holidays, they see that as an opportunity to do other things like go outside and play with friends or go for bike rides or go on adventures. And gaming isn't the only thing they want to do. Andrew, who I shared earlier, you know, when I went on Facebook and saw that he was in Central America building a school for, you know, a village in need, and he was doing that because he realized that there was more to life than gaming, you know, that to me is really inspiring. And if they're able to game a little bit and, you know, it's not a big deal, that's not a big deal. But if it's taking over their life, then I think that's where we need to support them.
Right. Now, as far as the actual action of gaming, are there some specific things that you could be doing while gaming that I'm thinking maybe a little bit more about the impact on you physically, like posture and your eyes. Are there any things that you would recommend that would make gaming a little healthier to do? Because there are some stats that you know may point to the fact that it will make you less healthy of a person. What are your thoughts there?
I mean, number one, you want to start looking at posture.
Mm-hmm.
I work on a computer. My posture's terrible.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something I was thinking about the other day of like, I've got like a decade of having to like redo my muscle memory on just my posture, right?
Now you're getting me to fix myself up.
I know.
Right now.
I'm like, even, you know, I remember my personal trainer for hockey, our team trainer when I was in high school, constantly telling me to pull my shoulder blades back, right?
Right.
And pull them together. And just yesterday in the elevator, I was like, oh, I need to do this. Because I'm constantly just like here.
They have some products that you can sit with, right? That'll kind of pull your shoulders back a little
yeah,
bit.
I just need to hire someone to pull my shoulders back at all times.
Exactly.
You know, so like posture is one, but I think even easier than that to think about is drinking water instead of drinking energy drinks. It's amazing how much energy you get from actually just drinking a glass or two of water compared to a bunch of sugar.
Right.
But when you're gaming, it's easy to be just pounding energy drinks. The other one is to be gaming in sunlight, right? So I can even see wherever you are right now, it looks like you have some sunlight,
mm-hmm.
or you have some natural light.
Mm-hmm.
Just being in a room where there's more natural light. Now, as a gamer, part of the experience is it's nice to do it in pitch black because you have a lot more like colors and stimulation. But gaming in a room with natural light is nice. Or in between games, taking a 5-10 minute break and going and putting your feet in the grass and getting some sunlight on you will make a really big difference for your mood, for your energy, for your overall well-being. And then for every kind of like 45 minutes that you're on the computer, you should actually be off the computer for your eyes to be able to look in the distance and not just at a screen. That's really important for eyesight. So as you can see, I'm also bad at that because I have glasses on. Mm-hmm. So really thinking of like posture, what are you consuming, your natural sunlight, having fresh air, feet in the grass, you know, and making sure you're getting time off to look around at other objects.
That's great. I love that. Now, I've heard some suggestions before about like getting family involved with video games. Have you ever recommended like a parent playing video games with kids, or has that ever made an impact on any of the people that you've worked with before?
A big fan of that is Jordan Shapiro, who wrote the book, The New Childhood, who's a friend. He plays games with his kids, and he's a big advocate of it. I've had mixed results with that.
Okay.
So I had one poor mother who heard this suggestion, and she was like, while my son is out, I'm going to log on his game and play and try and kind of like see what this is all about. And of course, she was playing a game like League of Legends, where she's now on a team and she has no idea what she's doing, and she's losing, and people are screaming at her and swearing at her and really mad. And, you know, she was horrified, right? Like just horrified, the poor mom. So sometimes like, you know, that would happen, but I do think that there can be an experience where you're sharing that world together and it's helping to give you something to talk about. It's giving you something to kind of bond over. But I think in that instance, it would be good to kind of focus on playing a specific game together. I met a mother actually at a recent gig in Albuquerque And unfortunately, her son had committed suicide, but they used to play games together all the time.
Mm.
And for her, that actually led to them developing a gaming problem, both of them.
Wow.
So now she can't game. But I thought that was a really interesting experience of like something that really bonded them together. And that's the harsh story that I've heard that's timely for me. But Jordan plays games with his kids, and it's a really good experience for them. It's something that they get to talk about. And so regardless of whether you're gaming together or not, I do think that we need to be mindful as a family to not kind of attack gaming, to not antagonize gaming, and to really, if they're gaming a lot, they have this passion for it, they have this interest in it, and how can we use that to connect better, to understand each other better, even if that's just understanding their motivation for what is it about gaming that they really love and enjoy, because that will give you a lot of information on what motivates them as a human being and how you could redirect that.
That little last part right there is like a great way to wrap up. I feel it's such a great summary. So Cam, tell us a little bit more about where we could learn more about you and everything that you're doing and get some access to some of your resources.
Gamequeers.com is the website. Tons of resources. I mean, I have 200 videos on YouTube for free. We have a guide for gamers to quit if they're interested in that on the website. We have a new program for parents that's very extensive and in depth to really help them kind of rebuild their family relationship, insert best practices into their home, and really learn how to communicate about this issue, because I think often communication is the thing that breaks down, and then it's just a major conflict in the home, and it becomes really stressful for everybody. And one of the most important things that we can do is really focus on, regardless of whether people are gaming or not, how can we rebuild the family relationship, because that's ultimately going to be the thing that we need to support someone if they're struggling with gaming or social media or technology or just anything else in their life. And so parents can find that on gamequarters.com. And we also have a parent support group on Facebook, which you can find by just searching Game Quarters into Facebook. And then I speak all over the world. I travel full time. So I'm almost done speaking for the year. But if anybody's listening and they're interested in having me speak to students or professionals or therapists they know, I'd be happy to.
Cool. Cam, thank you so much for your time. You speak the subject so effortlessly, and it's clear you've got a lot of passion and a ton of knowledge. So I appreciate you opening it up and sharing your story and all your incredible pieces of advice.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Cool. Thanks, Cam. I'm going to pause.